You are listening to the Running Channel podcast with me, Andy Baddeley, my co-host, Little Miss Windy Pops, Sarah Hartley, and over there in the corner, Rick Kelsey, pressing buttons. Oh.
If you haven't listened to last week's episode,
yeah,
we had
Sarah is a regular run farter.
I can't believe you said that out loud.
Little Miss Windy Pops.
Was
she's not even
that
bothered.
Actually one of the Little Miss or Mr. Men
No,
book?
it's not. It's not a Little Miss book.
It should have
Tell
been.
you what, that's
Should
a
have
gap
been.
in the market.
So
hey,
whilst-
look, I'm proud.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go away and write that book.
Great.
And now we should do a
Crack on.
podcast. This is why they don't always let me do the intros.
Let's dive in. I love how, Andy, you find that funny.
Yeah, I was laughing, but-
You're so proud of yourself.
I was laughing as I thought of it about 5 minutes ago, and then we had to wait for all the cameras to get set up. And I
For
thought,
context, the reason that I'm not actually reacting to that much is because my last name is Hartley.
I
When
see.
back in the day when I was at school,
Kids are mean.
I
Kids are
made
mean, aren't they?
I made a joke with a balloon, and ever since then, I was known as Sarah Hartley.
I've spoken to some of your friends from school, and they said that's not the true story at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I promise.
They said that
Hey,
there was
look,
5
once-
years of smelling like cabbage.
Eat your broccoli, kids.
She deals with it with such dignity, Andy.
I think normally it's me. It's me having to take a lot of the flack. So I just wanted to start this podcast on a different note
On a
before it all
different
comes
note.
back to me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, good.
But and speaking about me, we're going to talk about running a sub 4 minute mile as well, which is something very close to my heart. That's what the episode is all about today, as well as a couple of news stories, and then getting on to answering the questions that have been sent in to us at podcast@therunningchannel.com. So if you do ever want to have your questions answered on here, then please do email in.
Firstly, though, how's everyone's week of running been?
Oh, I had my gait analysed this week.
Did you?
Yeah.
How was it?
You two must have had it done loads of times, I imagine.
No, only once.
No? When you go in a machine, they then film you. They then show you where your feet are making contact with the ground, and they do it from both sides. And basically the aim when you have gait analysis is that you can be as symmetrical as possible, especially if you've previously had an injury. Not that I've had, anything major.
Well, you've never
been
injured.
I definitely wouldn't mention it if I did anyway. So I watched it back, and it's absolutely fascinating. So then they analyse your gait, and then they tie you up with the type of shoes, as in, heel to toe drop, height of the stack, that will actually fit with your gait. I was really skeptical of gait analysis.
Yeah.
Having had it done and looked at how your legs work, I would recommend it to anyone.
It's not like you to be skeptical of science and objective reasoning.
I don't know what you're saying.
I had a similar thing recently where we filmed a video with Manny that will be coming out. It might already be out actually.
Yeah.
Where he basically went through a runner's MOT with me, looking at for anyone MOT. Is that a universal thing?
Yeah, it is,
not.
yeah.
I don't know whether they have them in the US, but that's what your car needs to go through in order to be road
Like a
legal.
service.
It stands for Ministry of Transport, doesn't it? I think MOT.
Does it?
Yeah.
Well,
That's what it
basically, he
originally
did a
stands
full
for.
he did a full service on me, and
Hello.
Hello, Little Miss Windy
This
Pops.
is a family-friendly podcast, Sarah.
I hate doing this with you both. He basically went through like all of my kind of mechanics, how
Okay.
I'm working. One thing that I found really interesting though is that I have on my right foot, for as long as I can remember, I've always had a bit of a bunion. So like next to my big toe, a bit
Stop
of
with the sexy talk.
bit of my
In the first 4 minutes, you've really sold yourself to potential suitors here on the Running Channel podcast. If this was a dating pod, at the moment, you'd have a pretty low score.
Hey, well,
this is my Hinge profile. And on the side of my foot, it sticks out. And I just always thought that was a kind of, I don't know, like a genetic thing.
Yeah.
I remember at school, some of my friends' mums, had bunion surgery to get it off. And I thought, if it happens if you wear heels. But I was like, I've never really worn heels.
yeah.
Manny was like, oh no, this will be down to how you run.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm definitely going to misquote him, so watch the video. But basically, if you're putting loads of pressure towards that side of your foot, then it can cause basically a build-up. So he was like, you really need to sort that out and kind of strengthen your leg muscles.
So is this
in
on
your
the
foot.
inside or the outside of your foot?
The inside.
It's inside, like on the ball of your toe joint.
Okay.
Yeah. So next to my big toe, which I found fascinating.
Yeah,
so
so-
definitely don't go and see physios if you are injured. Go before, because you will save yourself so much money later down the line.
Yeah.
Because you're preempting all of the things that could possibly go wrong. Because I thought I am pretty much, apart from like a tail end of a back problem, I thought hip down, I'm so good.
Good Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no.
No.
And I've been doing calf raises wrong.
Oh, you've been going forward, haven't you? Not up and down.
Absolutely impossible. I never thought I would be unable to do a calf raise.
I did notice that before we did a challenge together 2 weeks ago, but I didn't tell you because I wanted you to fail.
Oh, Rick, absolutely brutal. But yeah,
Thanks, mate. Always supporting
But
me.
I was going to tell you today,
Right.
and you've just done it for me.
Of
So
course you are.
fantastic.
Of course you are,
The
mate. It's on your
key
notes,
with
right?
heel raise, yes. The key with key with raises, up and down, not
Yeah,
forward
not
or back.
forward.
Yeah, Andy, your week.
Yeah.
My week of running, I've tried to continue building up towards this marathon, and I'm still finding it satisfying to have structure to my week. Like we often talk about that, and I think that's given me like a new impetus towards training because I now have stuff that I know I need to tick off each week, as opposed to just like, can I squeeze a run in? Oh yeah, I'll just do this thing. Actually knowing exactly what I'm doing, going out the door and doing that thing, and then finishing. Incredibly rewarding.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you think your VO2 max is going to go up by the time you run a marathon?
I don't know because I think so, yes, because the variety of the training that I'm going to be doing does take into account that faster stuff. But the actual marathon pace stuff, I don't know whether that specifically would increase my VO2 max if that's all I was doing.
Yeah.
Without getting too much into it, Sarah, your VO2 max has gone up this week.
It
But
just-
what
that-
does
that
that
was-
mean?
was my little-
Oh,
So-
she's teed
That
in
was
right
my
at
very
there.
What's
subtle
normal?
segue.
You've just gone to 52,
Yeah.
haven't you? I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
on 50.
Very nice, Rick.
Nice.
What does that mean then?
I'm not sure I want to know what Andy's on.
Mine is 61, I think.
Of course it is.
But when I was competing, it would have been
Is
nearly.
it higher the better?
Yes.
Nearly 80.
Nearly. I didn't even say it. Did I? Did I say that out loud? And then.
No, yeah, you're about
nearly,
to form
I
the
was
word.
about to say nearly 80, yeah.
Nearly 80.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So, but it's affected by body weight. So if it's a number
Yeah.
in terms of your aerobic capacity divided by your weight. So if your weight is lower, then your VO2 max will be higher.
Well, how does
even
my
if
watch know what my weight is?
You're
You
oh my
input it,
goodness me!
Rick.
Did you do
the
it?
biggest technophobe. Yeah, when you set up your watch in
Yeah, when
Garmin
you set
Connect
up-
and whatever, it's
yeah,
all
you
it's
would-
all inputted for you.
You will have put your... You know what? After this, I'll go into your watch. We'll have a check. And,
Yeah.
And you might
Check you
get,
haven't- check you
might
haven't
get
been
a
fibbing.
lucky VO2...
Or
Or
the
two
other way.
things,
Yeah,
two
could-
things will happen. It'll either go dramatically down or
I'll go
dramatically
to
up.
10.
So yeah, that was interestingly, mine was about coming out of university as a relatively well trained runner, but not running enough really, and knocking on the doors to international teams, but by no means being anywhere near where I got to. My VO2 max was about 68 when I did a proper lab test, and then I got that right the way up to nearly 80, around about 80. By the kind of at the peak of my career.
So speaking of at the peak of your career, you were able to run quite significantly under a 4-minute mile.
Yes,
What was your bestest?
my bestest mile. You're trying to sort of
What
do
was
your
your-
best to diminish this. By,
What was your bestest little mile time?
yeah, 3:49.
Very
Was
nice.
my mile time. So under 350 was like a massive milestone for me. Having, sub 4-minute mile is the famous thing, but then at international level in men's 1500 meters of miles running, like under 350 was like a huge thing for me. I was going to use the word milestone, but that's
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice
Thanks.
fun there. The sub 4-minute mile for me was, I first heard about it. I used to be a study skills teacher and I used to go into loads of different schools. And I always used the sub 4-minute mile. We were given it as an example to use within the nature of studying, because Roger Bannister, loads of people were trying to break the 4-minute mile for ages. And then the first time it happened, Roger Bannister broke it at Iffley Road, Oxford.
yeah,
Track.
1954. Yeah.
Within, I can't remember the stats now, but I think it was something like 2 months or 4 months later, another X amount of people had also broken it.
A few others did do it within a year. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was, so I always use that as an example of like, go for something that seems impossible, because as soon as you can see that you can do it, it falls into place. But you said an interesting stat about this. How more people have climbed Everest than
think
have run
that's
a
true, yeah.
sub-4-minute
That's
mile.
incredible.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the magic of that really round number, isn't it? It's not really fair because there are just as many talented women attempting the mile or 1500 meters, but there's not quite such a nice mark.
Number.
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
from my maths, it's probably around a 425 mile
Yeah.
for women to have the same kind of be competing at roughly that level.
What is the record for the mile for women? I should know this.
Oh,
but I
for
don't.
women, they literally just said it the other day, which could have been a news story, but it wasn't because I was on holiday. I'm pretty sure that it was 407 or 409, but that was a
Nice.
huge leap forward.
Yeah.
That was like a 5-second world record.
Nice.
And the men's world record is 3:40.
4.7.
3:44.7.
It's the fastest 1 mile for a female is 4 minutes 7 seconds.
Okay, I got it right.
Yeah.
Incredible.
See,
that to me is so exciting though, because I know you can look at it as like, oh, well, for men's times, you're maybe getting close to the like 3:30. Like, imagine doing a sub 3:30 minute mile. But actually, I found that way more exciting than women are edging closer and closer to a sub 4 minute mile. There's something nice about a big round number, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's because it's totally arbitrary, right? It's what you said that like no one thought they could do it, and then all of a sudden Bannister did it, and then several more people did it. Because if you've run 4:01, 4 minutes is definitely, you'd think it is within reach.
Yeah.
And just the fact that they had to do it on a gravel track, and they were waiting around at Iffley Road famously for the flag to drop in the distance, so they knew that there was no wind, and they had pacemakers and all that sort of stuff, getting it perfectly right. They had it planned out. I think there's a real magic to it, but I'm biased because it was what I grew up with Co-Cram and Yvette from a British perspective, seeing their success globally, and that kind of magic of the Roger Bannister story, and then my Oxford and Cambridge connections, and having raced on those tracks like it. And actually, funnily enough, I was just about getting to the level where I got invited to this stuff in 2004, which was the 50th anniversary of Bannister's Mile. At Iffley Road, they held a big meet where they'd invited loads of international runners. Mo was in that race, actually, I'm pretty sure, Mo Farah. And I was so excited. Biggest race I've been invited to, on the start line, fell over.
Before it started?
No, I fell over as it started.
Oh, no.
So did you not race it?
I can't remember whether
Did
I
you
got
get
up
up?
finished or not. I can't remember. But
in those races, just a fall,
I think
you're
I did.
basically out, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, at the start, yeah. And I wasn't good enough. Later in my career, I probably could have handled a fall against, certainly to get back into the middle of the pack, maybe.
Yeah.
Depending on the level of competition. In the Olympics or something, it's game over if you fall over. But the distinction of a mile is it's this, because of everything being metric, the track's 400 meters, so a mile is 1,609. So you start 9 meters back from the start-finish line. You run that 9 meters, and then it's 4 laps from there. You start on a waterfall start, which I think we were talking about recently on the podcast.
It's like the curve on the
But
track.
that means that you've got, in a lot of men's races, they put too many people into them. They might have 15, 18 people on this 8-lane track, all trying to get into lane 1 in the space of 9 meters, which obviously the maths doesn't go.
So it's more rugby for the first.
Well, I mean, and I was
seconds.
really pathetic, so I ended up on the floor, yeah. And then, so that was 2004, and then it wasn't until, actually, maybe it was later that year that I then did breaks 4 minutes for the first time.
Oh, really? And how many years did you consistently break 4 minutes for?
So I should have looked this up, shouldn't I, for the podcast? But I'm pretty sure
Just go roughly.
I think for 10 years consecutively, I ran a sub 4 minute mile every year.
That's pretty cool.
That is pretty good.
Yeah, there's an incredible stat to maybe I shouldn't bring it up because it makes me sound a lot worse, but an amazing Kiwi runner who I competed against a lot, Nick Willis. I think he ran a sub 4 minute mile for 20 consecutive years.
That's unbelievable.
Wow.
Absolutely incredible. But yeah, I was really proud of that, and they got progressively faster and ran down to 3:49 in 2008 in the Oslo Dream Mile, which is this famous track in Norway, the Bislett Games. Really cool stadium. A lot of more modern stadiums build the field events outside the track. So I might have talked about this before, but so you're, as a crowd, further away from the running action on the track.
Mm-hmm.
But Oslo's an old stadium, and so lane 8 of the track is right up against the crowd, and then like the long jump and triple jump pits and stuff.
It's much nicer when the crowd. Much nicer that way.
Yeah.
Much nicer.
But not much nicer if you're a long jumper.
True, but it's a bit like when you watch a football game and
there's a track between you and the pitch.
It just distances you from the action, so you don't feel quite as close to it.
And it's the same as an athlete being in lane 1. Like it's not quite, so not at the 10,000s in Highgate, they let people right onto the track in lane 3. And it wasn't quite like that, but it's probably the closest thing I experienced, where you're in running in lane 1 in the mile, and then the track or the crowd are right on lane 8, and they're a little bit raised up as well, so they feel like they're really on top of you. That's a really cool feeling.
Nice. I want to ask now. I want to put it into context, because it's this incredible thing. We've heard some stats. How do you get to a sub 4 minute mile? What does it take? What does the training look like?
Well, I don't know where to start. So when I was a kid, my Andy, who coached me throughout my professional career, didn't coach me as a kid, so he started coaching me when I was about 19, 20. I had an amazing coach called Dave Jeffs, who sadly is no longer with us, through my teens, and he was amazing. for coaching that age group. And he had very simple philosophies. And one of them was on the track, I'd do 6 times 400 meters with a 1 minute recovery. Actually, we'd start with a longer recovery and then we'd bring it down throughout the season. And the idea was that whatever I could run 6 times 400 meters in with 1 minute recovery was what pace I could run for 1500 meters, which is the metric equivalent of the mile. So it's 109 meters short of the mile.
Yep.
And so that was like a predictor workout, I suppose. I think as you get faster and more senior, that number probably needs to be 10 times 400 meters to give you a more accurate representation of how, because you're getting that recovery. But broadly, that's what I did from the age of 13, probably every year for several weeks of the summer was like that same session on repeat to see if I could bring my recovery times down, bring my like lap times down. And then for a 4 minute mile, you're talking about under 60 seconds per lap. Because if you ran 60 seconds exactly, 1 minute per lap, then that's 4 minutes, but you've got the extra 9 meters. So you've got to take that into account.
That's interesting because it kind of goes against sometimes what we hear about training. So you're talking about doing the same session on repetition, so doing it every time. But we always talk about mixing up our training so our body doesn't get used to doing the same session because your body kind of figures it out. Yeah,
and we would do that a little bit. So we would do it for a couple of weeks and then do a couple of sessions for another few weeks and then revisit it. But definitely it was this is like pre-internet. This is like Dave had a way that worked for 11 to 16-year-old kids that he'd kind of not stumbled across, but he had honed over years. And he was like, well, let's stick to what I know. And then you didn't have access to sports physiology or to, he couldn't possibly know without literally phoning them up what other people were doing around the world to coach the same event, or without reading, Peter Coe's book about how he trained Seb Coe. So then he would it was fairly basic. And then that's what changed later in my career being coached by Andy, is there was much more variety, and then we would only occasionally dip back into those sessions. Yeah. Because as a kid, it probably doesn't bother you, but then once I was a professional, actually, I'd have found that quite dangerous. If you're doing the same session, which is a very clear indicator of exactly how fast you can run regularly. If you have a bad week, then you're like, oh no, like I'm nowhere near where I need to be. And that's psychologically difficult.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask. How much of a 4 minute mile do you think is psychological versus physical? Because that for me would be the biggest, that's what I'm struggling with at the moment for a sub 20 minute 5k, is like that for me is so punchy, so hard that actually if I'm not mentally ready on the start line, I could be in the best physical shape of my life and I have not got a chance of doing it.
I think it's hugely mental. So like I did a lot of work when I was going into races where my psychologist would say, well, there's 12 of you on that start line and probably 7 or 8 of them have already taught themselves out of the fact that they can win this.
That's fascinating.
And then the same thing, like silly things, but we were joking about bodily functions earlier, but like being on the start line with 11 other people and having someone remind you, oh, that person had to go to the toilet before they raced today. Or like that person, definitely more crudely put than that by the various people I spoke to. But that would be a good reminder, because I was like, oh yeah, they have the same, they're just humans. They're not up on this pedestal as this superstar that I might have seen having run a world record or whatever it might be. Same for you in your 5K. The people around you that are running 19-minute 5K, they're no different to you. They're lacing up in the same way. They're having to go out in the rain. They're having to do normal stuff. So don't talk yourself out of it. I think a huge amount of it is psychological.
Interesting.
How are you getting on with that, Sarah?
So hard. So hard. Yeah.
Sub 20 minutes.
Yeah. That for me is, this is going to be my other question as well. So sub 20 minutes is something that I had as like a very distant bucket list goal. Not sure if I could ever get there. But if anyone is listening to this and they're like, oh, could I? What are the credentials for being able to run a sub 4 minute mile? Because it's not within everyone's wheelhouse, is it?
No, it was a very specific goal for a distance for which I'd been training for my mid-teens. And I'd obviously been doing athletics since I was like 10 or 11. So there was a lot of years of speed and different types of training and being comfortable on the track and stuff like that. But yeah, I think you have to be able to run I can't think of some specific examples, but you'd have to be able to run a 200 meters, so half a lap of the track in sort of 26 seconds comfortably. You have to be able to run very close to 50 seconds for a 400 meter all-out effort. Obviously, those sound a lot faster than the pace you actually need to run at.
Yeah.
But you need to...
Do you think that's a good place to start? If anyone's like, oh, how far away am I from this? You just start off with like, okay, we'll break it. Because actually that's kind of how I started really chipping away at 5K times, was I went, okay, I would have to do 5Ks at this pace. Can I do one?
Yeah, and that's a really good way of putting it into perspective. Actually, my friends at university did exactly that. When I was training to try and break my first sub 4, they were like so intrigued by it, and they were fit footballers, rugby players, other sports people, and did a bit of running. And they challenged themselves. They came down with me one day to see if they could do one lap. And I know we've done this at the running channel as well. So could they do one lap at the pace that I'm trying to run a mile? And the answer was no for all of them, by quite a long way. Like, 5-10 seconds too slow for one lap.
Yeah.
And then I think all of a sudden, I'm not saying they didn't respect what I was trying to do, but that does give you
they realised what a size of a task it was.
And it's that's why more people have gone up Everest, I guess. So hopefully that's a little insight into it.
I found that super interesting. If you're listening to this and you're thinking like, oh, I wonder how far away I am, then obviously warm up, make sure you warm up. And try like in your next track session, if you've got 200s or 400s,
or even just in your strides, just clock 100 meter strides on the track. And so we're talking somewhere between 14.5 and 15 seconds for 100 meters. Or when I was running 3:49, it's quicker than that.
Very fast.
Thanks.
But very interesting. Well done, Andy.
Thank you.
That is the closest you will ever get to us being impressed.
Nice.
Just
about.
Yes.
You're listening to the Running Channel podcast. Up next, we've got a news story from the world of running. Plus, we've got your questions to answer.
But first, Sarah, what have you got for us from a news perspective?
I listened to a very interesting podcast over the last week, and I have a question, which is odd for the news.
Yeah.
Would you want to live forever?
Yeah.
Rick?
I'd take about 130.
Very specific.
Yeah.
So that's another 100 years from now,
Because
right?
then my face will start to fall. And I don't think I could deal with that.
So you say that. I was listening to a podcast with Brian Johnson, who in 2021 set up Project Blueprint, which is basically the one sole objective, don't die. And he is trying with an amazing...
my main objective most days. Isn't it?
Yeah, same. But his sole objective is that it's to see like how long can he carry on existing. But I found it so interesting because they didn't really mention exercise that much.
Really?
It was a 2-hour long conversation.
How's his face?
Beautiful.
Really?
Yeah.
Does he have more products than me?
Yeah,
I was going to say,
well,
you're putting a 100-year limit on how long you can be bothered to endure that skincare regime.
In the morning.
It takes me 2 hours to sit down.
So his morning routine, he has a bedtime of 8:30 every single day. His sleep score, which I found this was the most interesting, has been like 99.6% for the last 4 months. He takes 111 pills every morning
That can't
as
be
part
healthy.
of his routine,
111 pills.
and he stops eating at 11 a.m.
You know, if this guy kind of corks it in 5 years' time, we'll know that this is all nonsense, though.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's not very scientific,
because
is it? That's the impossible thing when it's just one person.
Well, so this is the thing. He's saying that you can't be objectively scientific about an entire human race. So none of the stuff that he was giving was like everybody should have their last meal at 11 a.m. or like everyone should go to bed at 8:30, because this is what I find it. I buy into this stuff. Like I've read tons of articles of like follow this celebrity's diet routine or like follow this person's skincare routine. Actually, what he's done is he has asked every single like organ in his body, basically, what do you want in order to survive? Like what's going to get you to their best? And that's what he's following.
He's trying to take the kind of the epitome of science in each different area. And then
because he was saying like the human brain sabotages itself. Like how many people, go, oh, okay, I really want to be like fit and healthy. And then actually your brain is the one telling you like, oh, let's sacrifice sleep so we can go out with our friends. Or like, oh, let's eat junk food.
But that's the question, Sarah. Does he have a fun life? I mean, I can't imagine this guy has a couple of bottles of Gavi on a Friday.
He did actually start off his perfect routine with having 3 ounces of wine with breakfast. But then he realised that it was too much of a calorie sacrifice to continue drinking.
Oh, right.
Oh, incredible.
Almost
so
sold me.
I want to just to go off on a total tangent. I know a little bit about wine. I'm definitely not a wine connoisseur. Is Gavi like a famous wine? You mention it all the time. I don't like. It's like everyone listening to the podcast either is like totally in the know about wine and they're like, oh yeah, Rick loves his Gavi.
Gavi.
Or is it just a you thing?
It's just a very good Italian grape. Okay. Very good wine. It's kind of medium range, but it goes with everything. You know,
Right,
it can go with chicken, seafood, meat.
Okay.
And this, Rick, is why you will not be living to 130.
Exactly. There we go. Yeah, that's the problem.
But I think
2
it's an
bottles a day.
interesting question. Like, how much would you be willing to sacrifice in order to live longer?
Yeah, it's the 8:30 thing that's the biggest one for me.
Yeah.
Not the tablets or the
Downtime.
drinking. It's 8:30. The kids are in bed, and then I've got 2 hours then of like, oh, this is my time. And sometimes that might just be tidying. Often it is. But even that's like listening to a podcast, so that's time to myself. So yeah, I'd need that unwinding time.
Interesting. Andy, what's your news story?
So this is a running channel news story. So this episode, as you're listening to it, the World Championships will have started in Budapest, and next weekend's podcast is a very special one. It's both a video and an audio one. Rick, Sarah and I will all be out in Budapest. We'll have a chance to speak to some of the best athletes in the world thanks to New Balance. So we're going to be out there as New Balance's guests. And this will be my first time back at a World Championships in quite a few years, since retiring, basically.
Do you think all the feelings are going to come flooding back?
Genuinely, I think, even thinking about it, I get that kind of like jittery, like
Really?
adrenaline, being in the stadium and stuff, which I know we've got access to, and speaking to the athletes about, and reminding myself, I suppose, of the call room and the nerves and the warm up and going through the rounds, because I would have had to run 3 rounds at the championships, like just qualifying. So you sort of have to do, that was so hard for me just to get through the rounds, and then you're in the final, and then that's about trying to win the medals, and you've done all this stuff that's really hard, and then people only really care about the medals bit. So all of that, yes, will come flooding back. So
Meanwhile, me and Rick are on holiday. Yay!
you're on a big jolly. Rick will be
Budapest.
desperately trying to find
Bit
a
of
good
Gavi.
bottle of Gavi in Budapest. Yeah.
Hungarian Gavi.
Yeah. If you do
Such a
have,
snob Rick.
yeah, so do get your questions in for Andy. Me and Rick will be otherwise engaged.
It's going to be fun.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, so keep an eye on our social channels this week, because we may well be giving you the chance to ask very specific questions for the guests that we have, and we're really excited about that.
Stay tuned. Up next, we've got questions. Rick.
Mark from Oxford. I'm doing couch to 5K at age 40. I'm basically just starting out, having done 2 one-hour-long weight sessions, one based on hypertrophy,
Yeah, building muscle size.
and the other on muscle endurance in the week for years. I want to maintain my gym sessions and work in running in addition to that. In the absence of one of your nice watches and just having a basic one, how do I know how long I need to recover from each workout? Andy.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Every time that you do a new form of stimulus, you're going to take a little bit of time to recover from that. But that doesn't mean that you have to rest until you're fully recovered. So if you go and do a little bit more running than you've done before, do something new in the gym before, then you're going to get DOMS 2 days later. But it's okay to a point to run through that, as long as that's not changing your running mechanics to the point where you're going to compensate and then end up getting injured because you're, shuffling on one leg, because one leg's DOMS is worse than the other. So as long as it's just a bit of general overall soreness, then I would just not worry too much about muscle soreness from new input, but more go on your energy levels. So trying to work out whether you feel recovered, ready enough to go again. Early morning heart rate is a good measure of this. I know talking about not having a fancy watch to tell you when you're recovered, but if you can take a baseline of your resting heart rate every morning when you wake up, and then just keep an eye on that, if that starts to creep up, then you need a little bit of extra recovery time.
And the thing is, your watch telling you when you're recovered, sometimes it tells you it takes 4 days, when actually your body kind of tells you don't need 4 days.
Well, and that's 4 days on your watch is when it says that. That's 4 days until you can do another hard session. So you can still run during that 4 day period. But yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about the tech here. I would just listen to your body. Don't increase everything overall by more than 10% in a 1 week period.
That's key, isn't it? That's such a good fact. Don't do more than 10% in 1 week.
So if you are building on couch to 5K, then and life does get in the way, so don't feel like you have to cram stuff in. Like what is likely to happen is that you have more time at the weekends. So if you are going to exercise 3 or 4 times a week, you go Friday, Saturday, Sunday, kind of cram it in, and then you've got all week to recover. But actually, you probably do need to space them out if you can, to give yourself every chance of kind of recovering properly.
And I think it's good that he's going to continue with the weights as well,
Yeah.
because weight sessions so important.
Yeah, you've probably actually got it the best way around, Mark, because most people will start running and then try to incorporate weights, and actually the weights would be the thing that you struggle to fit in more, or that's what I found, because I firstly started doing it I was like, great, I'm going to add in the gym, I'm going to do it on my rest day. No.
Yeah, it's almost better to like take a little bit of time off your run and then almost go like run at the gym or straight to the gym and then do your weights, and then you've kind of done everything in that 1 hour, an hour and a half period. if you are short of time.
Yeah.
That's
But
what
I
think about
do
the
on
overall
my-
volume still.
Yeah.
Nick from Edinburgh, but living in Burnham-on-Sea. Is that specific enough for you, Rick? Very good. I like that, Nick. I really,
Good job,
I
Nick.
really
Yes,
like
Nick.
that. Yeah, feel free to give me a GPS location next week. I'd like to increase my pace and wondered if and how I can work on increasing my stride length while maintaining my cadence without increasing my perceived effort, or is it just down to fitness? I'd be really, really cautious about increasing your stride length if it's something you've had for absolutely ages.
Yeah.
I saw someone at the weekend really pulling on their stride length when I was doing 5K.
Like overstriding. reaching out in front of
Overstriding.
them,
And I was chatting to him afterwards, and he said, yeah, he's trying to speed up by increasing his stride length. And I said, well, how do you feel now? He said, well, I feel really sore. And I said, well, I'd probably be a little bit cautious, because if you're pulling yourself in directions your body's not supposed to go, then your body's going to find the easiest point of weakness, and that's where it's going to break.
I think it's like what we said before as well, and that shouldn't necessarily be the conscious thing that you're thinking about whilst you're running. So like maybe, okay, if you want to go faster, do a really thorough warm up and then just think about speed. And it might be that your stride increases and your pace increases, but actually your body is going to self-optimize to what it needs to do.
Yeah, Rick's hit the nail on the head here, and this is what we talked about fairly recently, I think, on the podcast actually, is your body's relatively good at self-optimizing, so it's already giving you the most protective form of running. So yeah, and Sarah's right in terms of focus on something else. So in this case, I think about the more training that you do, the fitter you're going to get, but also if you can make your stride more powerful, then for the same cadence, your stride length will be longer without you trying to stretch your stride.
Yeah.
And so that could be things like drills and really focusing on like an active foot contact directly underneath your hips. So if you use your hamstrings and your glutes, and if you're doing calf raises properly and all of those things, then when your foot hits the ground, you get a much more elastic energy return, a much more elastic rebound, and that drive off the ground will be so much more effective that for the same cadence, you will have a longer stride length. But it's not thinking about, I think if you think about a longer stride, you force yourself to land in front of your body, which is a disaster. So don't do it.
Yeah, I've definitely tried to do that when I've really been struggling with pace, and I've gone like, oh, maybe I should just try this.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Just work on speed and drills.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that. So yeah, maybe focus on the cadence itself and the power of your stride, not lengthening the stride specifically.
And best of luck, Nick. Let us know what you're training for.
Yeah, we'd love to know. And whether that was useful and how you get on with it and trying to implement it, because we can try and do a follow-up if you want.
Well, another successful episode.
Yeah, we got
I'm
through it.
so excited about next week.
Oh, next week is going to be so good.
So excited.
New location. We're going on the road.
We're hitting the road.
For the second time
You guys
ever.
are excited for this road trip, and I'm look at my body language. I'm genuinely.
Why
a
are
bit
you so
nervous.
worried? We're going to Hungary.
Yeah, but it's that was my world for so long, and I actually just feel so detached from it now that it's a little bit scary.
Don't
You know
worry about
what?
it. What do you prefer, Buddha or Pest?
I'm hungry just
two sides
thinking
split by
about
a
it.
river, right?
Yeah, Buddha or Pest.
I'll
Apparently
let you know
better
next week.
spas in Pest. I'll be in Pest. You lot will be in Buddha.
Tell you what, Rick, you know what you are? You're a pest.
It's good.
And on that note,
Brilliant.
we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers, Buddha.